Welcome to the Deep Impact Investing Podcast with Kim Griego-Kiel on behalf of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. In this podcast, I discuss sustainable impact investing, how to create portfolios that match your values, and a variety of other topics such as financial education, environmental sustainability, social justice, and sustainable food systems. Do you want to know if your investments seek the kind of accountability from corporations that you demand? Listen in as I explore the burning question, are you investing like you give a damn?
Hello and welcome to Deep Impact Investing with Kim Griego-Kiel of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. Kim, what's going on?
It's summer. I'm so happy. It's going to be 90 degrees today.
Oh, in Oregon?
I love the heat.
That's nice. Yeah,
I know.
And from, you know me, I grew up in the Northwest
Right.
in Washington State, and we just didn't have mugginess, right? So if it's 90, It's usually 90 and beautiful.
Yes, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, 90 here in Omaha. No, it's not beautiful. It's not gorgeous. It's just hot and muggy, sticky. You're just like, where's the air conditioner?
Well, I am remembering now the allergies that I have here. Of course, I grew up here.
Yeah.
And so I have a little froggy throat. And allergy season is upon us. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. Well, you have a special guest on the show today.
I do have a really special guest, and I'm really excited. I know you know her very well.
I do.
So, I'm hosting today Christine Luken on the podcast.
I wish I had an applause button. I really do at this point.
Yay! Yay!
That's right. And I have a noise canceller on my mic right now, so even if I clap, you can't hear it.
Oh, well, I'll clap.
There we
go. All right. So Christine Luken is a financial dignity coach.
Yeah.
And she has her own podcast, newsletter. She has several books out, and I am thrilled to have you with me today, Christine.
Thanks so much for having me. And I do share your affection for hot weather.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I hate being cold. So
me too. Yeah. It's not
summer.
my thing. Yeah.
No, me neither.
So I want to really get to know you better. We've had one conversation on the phone, and I've looked at some of your newsletters, and of course I have your book, and I'm holding it up, but not that anyone can actually see, but Money is Emotional.
Yeah.
Prevent your heart from hijacking your wallet. I mean, brilliant, right? This book is so fabulous. I don't even know where to start.
Well, I'm glad you love it.
Yeah, I really, really liked it. And I have marked several things in here. I want to sit down and go through this with my spouse, even though it aren't serious problems, but it's all going to be helpful in some way.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. And let's start a little bit more about you.
Okay.
I know you love hot weather.
I do.
Great. And what else is in your personal life that you want to share with the listeners that it may be reflective of your business?
Oh, gosh. Well, I always say that 3 of my favorite things are cash, coffee, and cats.
Oh, the 3 C's. Well, I got
3 C's.
Yeah, I have the coffee for sure. Who doesn't love cash, right?
Yeah.
But my last one would definitely be dogs.
Okay. So you got fur babies.
Yes, fur babies are the best. All right, so let's talk about your book. Again, Money is Emotional. Prevent your heart from hijacking your wallet. And I think this was your first book.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's broken out into 6 parts.
Yes.
And I would like to have you, how would you summarize each section? If you just had to put a little summary around these. I mean, you don't have to do all 6, but, I'm just thinking, if I look at I'm flipping through the book here, table of contents, you literally break it out into part 1. And it sounds a lot to me like where you've come from.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I like to say that this book is half financial how-to and half tabloid of my life as I crashed and burned financially.
Yeah.
And all of the things that I learned through that process, because in my 20s, I did crash and burn financially despite having an accounting degree. And it was because I allowed my heart to hijack my wallet. I was engaged to a guy who had terrible money habits. He was in and out of jobs and even in and out of jail. And I thought if I just loved him enough that he would change. And he did. He got worse.
Oh,
So
yeah. See, it wasn't the change you were expecting. Yeah.
it was not. So I found myself at age 26, being deeply in debt, pretty much having trashed my credit score. I was dealing with collections. And there was a lot of shame and embarrassment around that because I worked in accounting. Like I was someone who had all the head knowledge, and yet I was not doing any of it. And it was because of that relationship. It's like we do things that go against our financial common sense sometimes because of matters of the heart and our emotions. And what I realized is, on my own journey to healing, and you have to understand this was 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
I was, starting to read a lot of different things on personal finance. And there was a ton of like how-to type books out there that pretty much like gave you a checklist or a framework and said, like if you just do this thing, if you just follow this recipe, if you just go down this checklist and you do all these things, then you're going to have financial success.
It doesn't work that way. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It really doesn't.
Right. It doesn't, because there are so many things that affect our behavior with our money. And so I wanted to bring in the emotional side of things and give people very practical ways to increase their emotional intelligence around money, and to shed some insight into why they may be doing things that are counter to the voice of reason and what they know they should be doing. Because what I would find with my clients is that they knew what they should do, they wanted to do it, and yet something in their emotions was blocking them, whether they were conscious of it or not, because sometimes they're not conscious of what the reason is. Well, but then they would feel bad about themselves.
Right. So before we go down that road, I really want to talk about the emotional part of this, which is kind of where you're going, and just the book is really your personal story, and how you learned to deal with your emotions around your money, and I applaud you for that. It's a very hard thing to do, including, I think about myself when I first became a financial advisor. All I had invested was a very small, simple IRA account. And it's, that's all I had for a really long time. I was a single mom. I had 2 kids. I just didn't save. I could have probably when I look back on this, but I didn't. And so that also reflects how I talk to my clients and have dealt with my clients over the years.
Yeah.
So I think everything that happens to us from when we're children through especially early adulthood is going to affect our money situation.
Yeah.
And including your most recent book, divorce.
Yeah. Financial dignity after divorce. It's a very emotional time of life, and it is ripe for making financial mistakes.
Absolutely.
But it was very interesting because shortly after I published Money is Emotional, I found out that science had proven that the moment of decision happens in the same part of our brain that processes emotion. And it was interesting because they found this out like completely by mistake. They were studying this group of stroke victims that had damage in the part of their brain that processed emotion. So they were very high functioning. They just had a hard time expressing emotion and interpreting emotion in other people. And so as they were doing this study with them, they took a break for lunch and they said, do you want a hamburger or do you want a chicken sandwich? And like literally none of them could make a decision.
Wow.
None of them could make a decision. And that's when they realized, like, oh my God, this is where the seat of decision making actually happens. This is where the moment of decision happens. And so
that is fascinating.
Absolutely
fascinating.
I know. And, you know, I have this frustration with, you know, financial professionals who tell their clients, just leave emotion out of this decision, just do the logical thing, because you're asking people to do something that's physically impossible.
Right. So I love this because over the time period I've been doing podcasting, I've touched on a number of the things that you talk about, but not with your experience. You know, I had a podcast on deconstructing your money messages, what you get from, you know, childhood on, and podcast 59, or sorry, podcast 48, if you haven't listened to that, so go back and listen. And then you talk a lot in this book about working with your kids. And I also, very early on, it's hard to believe it was my second podcast where I was talking about how you should start working with your kids when they're young.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit too. And one of the things that struck me at the very beginning here of your book is where you really liken the person who can't make good money decisions because of all of the emotional baggage that they carry, and the recovery of that, to an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, it's like getting off sugar.
Like that.
Yeah. You know, sugar is hard too, but you know, you have to really hit rock bottom most of the time before you start to make changes.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't mean rock bottom like you're living on the streets, you know, with no food or money, but financially you're hitting, you know, that might be a process too, but financially you're really hitting that place of, oh my God, this is so overwhelming. I have too much debt. I don't know where I'm going to, you know, go, how I'm going to get rid of it. Should I file for bankruptcy? Those types of things. And then you might finally get serious about it.
Yeah. It's like you have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired about your money.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there are people who never do that, and they just continue to make the same mistakes over and over again and find themselves at 70 in a really not so fun situation.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate because usually other family members have to end up taking care of them, and there can be a lot of family drama around the money.
Absolutely. Whether you're inheriting money or you are providing financial support for your parents. And I am actually in that position where I've been providing financial support to my parents. And I love my mom, but she did not know how to handle money. And she taught me all of the bad things, which have been,
oh no.
Yeah. I talk about this in the Money Messages podcast because when I turned 18 for my birthday, what my mom did was take me down to JCPenney's so I could get a credit card.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Right. I know.
Wow.
I was like, okay. And that was, you know, to me as an 18-year-old, really exciting, you know, with my $200 credit limit or whatever it was at the time. It was a long time ago. 18 was a long time ago for me. But
for me too.
Yeah. So, you know, that's very interesting. And, you know, you really start in the first section of this book talking about all of these pieces, which is amazing. And
really digging into the mindset. I mean, that's really the first step, is for people to pay attention and be mindful of what's actually going on in their head around money.
Yeah, you talk a lot about, not a lot, but you talk about mindfulness. And it was funny. I was literally writing down last night a question about, you know, taking notes about mindfulness. And at the moment I was writing this down, my watch told me that it was time to spend a minute of mindfulness to come down from the day. So I have this new Apple Watch, and it does all of these weird things. In fact, you know, it tells me like, okay, it's time to start getting ready for your bedtime so you can stop looking at your computer or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is new. Okay, mindfulness. I was just talking about that. So probably we don't need to talk about that because that was everything people need to know. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Seriously, why is mindfulness so helpful?
Well, I think because we are on autopilot so much, and it's interesting because about 95% of our daily actions are unconscious. They're on autopilot. And, for some of that, that's fine because engaging your active mind to remember how to tie your shoes or drive a car or brush your teeth, we really don't want to be wasting brain power on that. So essentially, when you have repeated a habit so many times, it basically transfers from your conscious mind into your unconscious mind, and then it can just run on autopilot. But the problem is we have some unhealthy money habits that are unconscious, and it could be ignoring your money until things are on fire. It could be emotional spending because it makes you feel better. There's a lot of habits that are on autopilot relative to our finances that may not be in our best long-term interest.
I want to stop you there because I appreciate you saying that they may not be in your best interest instead of saying these are bad habits.
Yeah.
you don't, because really what you want to do is go, this was a very bad habit you have to get rid of. But, we can't just do that with people because they shut down. So your approach is very kind and welcoming.
Yes. Well, I really hate it when money gurus shame people and, kind of pull the dad card and scold people because it's really not helpful. And we're talking to adults, right? And when people are coming to us, they want our advice. They usually want to change. They want to improve. And so, I really see my goal as getting people off of autopilot, getting them to start paying attention and start noticing and actually start to sit in the feelings and not stuff them, not ignore them, and kind of ask themselves like, what's the root of this? And am I okay with this? Is this something that I really want to continue doing in my life? So for me, I've said this before to clients, like, I'm not your money mom. Right?
Yes.
I'm not here to tell you what to do. My goal really is to get you to see exactly what's going on, to help you to make the adjustments that you need to make so that money is supporting your happiness and it's not stressing you out. And that looks different for everyone. I mean, I have clients who get Botox. I have clients who like to go to the casino or that like rare bourbons. And so for me to say, you can't do this, you shouldn't do that, that's really not my place. My place is to really show them where everything is going and say, okay, you have said that X, Y, and Z is really important to you. And in order for us to start shifting away from where you are and start moving down the road, let me give you some options. Here's like a whole bunch of different things that we could do. What feels good to you? Like, what are you seeing that you're spending money on that's not even giving you any value? Because usually there are things that they're mindlessly spending money on. I mean, we always find subscriptions where they're like, oh, I thought I canceled that. Or I'm not even using that anymore. And it's like, all right, well, let's get rid of it. And we can start putting that muscle behind, the Paris trip or, maxing out the retirement account or whatever it is that lights your fire.
Yeah. For me, it's travel. And I want to travel places. We've always, spent less money on housing so that we could travel. That's been our passion, my wife and I. And, I recently retired from active work in Horizons day to day. And so I know it's like I'm semi-retired. I'm still doing the podcast. I'm still talking to folks and, helping all of that. But, my wife and I decided that in quote retirement, because we're still in our 50s, our late 50s, right? We have a budget for frivolous spending every month.
I love
or
it.
something. So we each get the same amount, and we just, if we're like, oh, I need that book, gotta buy it. But we have to make sure we're calculating that we don't go over our budget. So I think that's also helpful, because again, we talked about it, but I like that you're not the money mom.
Yes.
And you're pretty open about that. You might be the money guru fairy. I don't know.
I like to say I'm like that money smart friend that you meet for coffee. So you can say like, hey, would you just help me get my crap together when it comes to money?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes your best friend is going to be the one to do that too. You're like, okay, you're my BFF. And they're like, you need to get your SHIT together, whatever.
It's so funny because I have so many of my clients tell me like that's what I do for them. They're like, if I have to describe you to my friend, I'm like, this is what I tell them. Like, nice. Christine helps me get my money crap together.
Yeah, it's excellent. I'm sure you probably have more clients than you can actually handle, because people are like, can I get in? Can I get in? Can I get in? Let's talk about kids.
Okay.
And you have a number of chapters. This is the other thing I like about the book. The chapters are short.
Yes.
So you're not overwhelming anyone, and you can read a 3 or 4 page chapter and then look at the action item at the end. Yes. And if you don't have children, you should still read that, I think, but you don't have to necessarily do the action items. So anyway, back to the kids. I think nowadays kids rarely learn about money in schools. I know you talk about it a little bit, but I remember in high school I don't even know what the course was, but it was some economics-based course that everyone had to take. And we got a set amount of money. We had to look in the paper. We had to find an apartment. We had to find a job, how much that paid, create our budget. My kids didn't do that.
Yeah. I remember doing something similar where we got a certain amount of money that we had to like feed our imaginary family with. And I remember getting now I don't even know if they still have Sunday papers, but basically I was getting like the Sunday papers, and I was getting the ads, and I was like cutting out, the package of hot dogs for $1 or whatever. And so we had to bring this project in of like, this is what my family is eating for $100 this week.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Those are good things. And here's the other thing I love. And I never thought about this, and I'm sorry I didn't, but when you were 16, your mother, gifted you her old car, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in exchange for that, it sounds like you became responsible for a portion of the family money. So
I did.
Tell me about that.
So, my mom had gone back to school, back to college. And so I think she was like, okay, Christine is excited to drive. If I give her my old car, we're also going to give her some responsibilities. So some of those responsibilities were like picking my brother up from soccer practice.
Yeah.
But the other big one was I was now responsible for the grocery shopping. And so she would basically send me with the ATM card, and I was to get a certain amount of money out of the ATM. And she basically said, okay, here's the list. Here's everything we need. If you are a smart shopper, if you want to use coupons, whatever is left over, then you can have that money, for gas money or whatever. Now, I will say it took a few weeks to kind of work out the kinks, because there were certain things where I was like really being over aggressive about like buying the cheapest things.
Oh, look, it's like, the white box of generic macaroni. We're going to get that because it's
she's like, no. We have to buy Kraft macaroni. Like,
right.
So she told me like, there are certain things where I do want the brand name. She's like, I appreciate what you're doing here. However,
these are all good lessons.
And it taught me so much because, it gave me a good reality check about how much groceries cost. And I don't,
oh my gosh,
most high school and even college kids have zero clue about how much groceries cost until they have to start paying for them themselves. And all of a sudden it's like sticker shock.
Right. Well, it's sticker shock for me to go to the grocery store. So
I know.
It's a very, very good lesson for kids to learn. And again, I wish I had done that for my kids. I have 2 boys and, they're actually both pretty good with money, but geez, what a great lesson. And again, in your book, you talk about ways to start with your young child, moving up to, as they get into young adult time. And for me, I think that's really important because I didn't learn those skills.
Yeah.
I wasn't taught those skills. And if we don't really learn them from our parents, then it's forget it. It's all over.
Well,
it's really hard.
Here's what's terrible. My dad did teach me those things and I ignored all of them.
Well, there's that too, right? Like,
I did come back around, right. And there are times like, when you were describing your parents and your mom reminded me a lot of my mother-in-law who passed away several years ago.
I'm sorry.
And I mean, she just never grew up financially.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very interesting because my husband and his older sister, who are about 18 months apart, they've got younger brothers who are 8 and 10 years younger, I think, than my husband. And they were responsible for taking care of them after school and during the summers. And when his mom got divorced, they actually had to contribute to the grocery budget because she didn't have enough money to pay all the household expenses. So, when my husband was in high school, him and his sister actually had a lot of responsibility, both financially and with their younger brothers. And so both of them became the exact opposite of their mom.
That makes sense.
So it's interesting because sometimes people will do what their parents did, and sometimes there will be, this discomfort. I mean, I don't want to necessarily say trauma, but sometimes it can be where they see ooh, I don't like that. That doesn't feel good. And they'll do the exact opposite of what their parents did.
Yeah. So there's that, sometimes the kids definitely do the opposite. And then other times, well, they're still going to do the opposite because, it's the do what I say, not what I do kind of philosophy.
And just rebel against the parents.
Yes.
There's always a little bit of that in the teens and 20s.
Absolutely. But I think if you're giving them that foundation, like your father did, they will come back around.
Absolutely.
Everybody has to make their own stupid mistakes in order to really learn, right?
Unfortunately so.
Yeah. So there are that.
But it makes for good material for my books and my blog and my podcast.
Absolutely.
Some juicy stories in there.
Right. You share stories of clients and sometimes I think, how hard that must have been for them. When they talk about their embarrassment and how that it can be difficult. So I want to kind of skip to the end of the book because we're gonna absolutely run out of time for all of the questions I have for you. But I was really struck by the chapter titled "You Are Rich." And I come from a background of looking at sustainability and impact investing and that kind of thing. And so when you listed out those things, I have it tabbed here, so I'm gonna pull it up because otherwise you're gonna be like searching. Let's see. I have it tabbed, but now I can't find it. I'm almost there. Okay. You are rich. We in America are rich. Absolutely. And I don't know if you remember any of the things that you listed here off the top of your head. You probably do. Why don't you share them with the listeners?
Oh, so now I need to find it.
Oh,
So
well,
I can
okay,
say it
I'll
exactly
do it. Yeah.
verbatim because I
Yeah.
don't want to misquote it. So
Okay, so then
you tell us.
I have it. So what you say here is, you're asking people because they're like, oh, well, I'm not rich. I don't have a BMW. I'm not making $100,000 a year plus. But do you have drinking water?
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We can just turn the tap on, unless you live in the horrible city in Michigan that still probably doesn't have clean water. I joke, but it's serious. Those kind of things. And, can you take a hot shower? Do you have food in your pantry and refrigerator?
Yeah.
And honestly, there are some people who don't have these things even in the US, but the people who are asking this question or saying this are most likely the people who, again, do you own a car?
Yeah.
Do you own a home? Or are you able to pay rent? Probably is a good thing too. Do you sleep on a mattress?
Yeah.
Yeah. By yourself?
Yeah.
And not with, 6 other people?
Yeah.
And do you make more than $2 a day?
Yeah.
It's
pretty crazy that a lot of the world lives on less than that.
Right. Yeah. 90% of the world or something like that, lives on less than $2 a day.
Yeah.
And it's really eye-opening if you look at it from that perspective. And I don't want to be giving a disservice to the folks who really are under the poverty line due to no circumstances of their own. Maybe they did get divorced, or maybe the spouse who provided most of the income just left, and then they have to, provide food for their children, clothes, that kind of thing. But generally we have clothes on our back. But those who can't afford fresh food, who live in a food desert, they can't fill their refrigerator. So we know that that's part of the US as well, but still it's relative to your personal experience. But I loved it because when you think about it that way, you're like, okay, I'm rich.
Yeah. Well, and I think what really brought that lesson home for me was, when I hit financial rock bottom, I had to move in with my dad for several months. And, he basically said, look, I'm not going to lend you money. I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to pay your debts for you. But what I will do is I'll give you a safe place to stay for free for 3 months. I will help you make a plan to get back out on your feet. And he started talking to me about giving and about giving back. And I basically told him, he's like, whether you give to the church or to the homeless shelter. And I started crying and I'm like, I am homeless.
Right.
And he looks at me and he's like, Christine, you're living in my spare bedroom in a golf course community. You are not homeless. Like, I will drive you downtown and show you what real homelessness looks like. Like, Absolutely. You're not living under a bridge. And so he's like, look, just start small, even if it's like $5 a week. And that's like literally where I started. $10 every pay period, $20 a month. I gave it to the homeless shelter. That's about 10 miles away from my house. And it just started from there. It was like, as things started to improve, I started to give more. And it was like, I realized that even at my lowest point, I still had things that I could be grateful for.
Absolutely.
And I always, that's one thing that I do consistently is I write down every day 3 things that I'm grateful for every day. So by the end of the year,
great habit. Yeah.
By the end of the year, I've written down 1,000 things to be grateful for.
Oh my gosh.
And it takes me like 2 minutes to do it, and it's just like, it keeps you in that frame of mind that even though you may not be where you want to be financially today, you still have a lot of things to be grateful for. And when you come from that energy of gratitude, there's much more peacefulness and positivity there.
Yeah, even if you're struggling and you think, well, I'm grateful for my children. I'm grateful that I could pay the electric bill today. Whatever it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's amazing. I was reflecting on your situation with your dad and how he wouldn't lend you money, but he was like, okay, you can stay here for 3 months, get back on your feet. When my oldest son decided to no longer go to college, I didn't know for a while, but he was living at home. And when this all finally happened, I was paying for everything. He was living at home. And I said, look, if you're not going to go to school, you've got to have a job. Well, that didn't happen. And so finally I said, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to pay for you to get out to Florida where your brother's in college, his younger brother, and you guys can get an apartment, and I will pay your part of the rent for 3 months. And then you're on your own.
Yep.
And, he was either going to sink or swim, and he swam. He did it.
Yeah.
And he's 34, and only once during that younger time period did he ask me for money, and it was for a car repair.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. So we have to wrap it up, and you're
I know. So we'll just say this is part 1, right?
Yeah. I feel like we could have more conversations around this because, I want to talk about how, you talk about part of this we've just talked about is, money isn't everything.
Yeah. But
let's just finish here with your conclusion in your book.
Okay.
and what you want people to, the one takeaway you want folks to have if they read your book.
Let's see. I mean, honestly, it's really paying attention to their thoughts, words, emotions around money, because that is really what is driving their behavior. Just taking things off of autopilot and really contemplating, what am I doing with my money? How is this making me feel? Is this supporting my happiness? What are my long-term goals, for my life and for my finances? I'm honestly just amazed at how many people have never sat down and defined that, because they're just going from crisis to crisis.
Yeah, it's very true that happens a lot. And so I think there isn't such a thing, but I really think that you have a PhD in the emotional part of money.
All right, I am going to own that.
Yes, do own it. Own it, girl.
Well, and the one thing I also want to tell people as well is that the fact that money is emotional doesn't have to be a bad thing, because we can learn how to harness the power of our emotions and actually use them as fuel to achieve our goals. And we can also learn how to short circuit some of those negative emotions so that they don't keep tripping us up.
Yeah, exactly. You can change, you can do it.
Yeah.
And then once folks have gone through your process and they've learned about the emotions around their personal money, and they've gotten their situation all clear and cleaned up to their satisfaction, what they need, and then they start saving for investing, for retirement, we can help them with that.
Yeah.
We're on our side.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Yes. So when you're ready to get that going, or you have this old 401k that maybe is just sitting there and you don't know what to do with it because you thought, well, maybe I'll take it out to pay off my debt. Don't do that. Come see us.
Yes.
At Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. And the website's Horizon SSFS.com. So Horizon's Sustainable Financial Services. You can also call the office 505-982-9661 and talk to Johan. He would really like to take your call anytime. He was telling me the other day he had a walk-in, and that never happens.
Ooh.
It just never happens. It happened to me once, and so then it just happened to him, which I think was amazing. But please email him info@horizonssfs.com. Thank you, Christine.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to continue this conversation at some point.
Yes.
When we can mesh our schedules again.
Yes, I would love that.
Okay, right, this has been fun. This has been fun. I love being a fly on the wall. Yeah. Well, here's the thing: is that it conjured up a story, and I got to tell it because you'll both appreciate it. Okay. From the beginning of the podcast, you were talking about, the money folk can give you a list of things to do that'll make you successful, but it's not like everybody follows that list.
Right.
And then talking about education when people are younger and in school, what financial education is there? And there's not a lot. But my wife and I piloted a program here at Boys Town when we were here the first time, where we would take a senior the last 3 months they were here and help them create a budget that they would earn, fake money every day for going to school and doing their homework and all that stuff, as though that was their job. And then they'd have to pay bills off of that. But they were also given real money every week to go grocery shopping and buy their own food. And they would cook their own food with the caveat, with the understanding that you can ask us questions. We're not going to do it for you, but you can ask us questions. If something's unclear, you can ask us questions. So one of the young men that did this, we went shopping and he bought the largest box of malto meal you could possibly buy, because it was something that he ate at his I think his grandmother's house, and he loved it. So I think that's such a great connection. However, when that malto meal box is about a quarter of your grocery budget, because it was so big, or whatever it was a lot of his money. I'm like, you want to buy that big? Yes, I'm going to. This is great. Okay, fine. So he had to learn that lesson. He scrimped on some other things so he could get that huge box of malto meal. And then he goes to cook it. So here's where it ties into the beginning of the podcast. There is a recipe on the box, directions on the box, but he read them. He measured out the water. We were watching him, we're right there with him. He's doing great. Measured out the water, measured out the malto meal that is poured into the water as it's boiling. And then you stir. I don't know if you're familiar with malto meal, either one of you, but
it's been a long time. Yeah.
It's been a long time. So you just stir, and then it's like magic. Malto meal appears at some point. However, it takes a little bit. And so during the process, he starts to panic because it's not becoming malto meal yet. It's still in very small granular form, swimming around the water. And he is positive he didn't put enough in.
Oh, no.
So he put more in and didn't measure it, but I'm assuming it was probably about half the amount he was supposed to do before. So now it's 1.5 times the amount that he should have. And all of a sudden, malto meal is starting to do its thing, and it's starting to get hard to stir. And now he's panicking. So he adds more water.
Oh, no.
He added too much water. So now it's back to malto meal soup. And so now he adds more malto meal from the box. So long story. And he's not asking questions like, do you need any help? I got this. And we do that when we're younger. We do that in our 20s. I got this. Right. And we don't follow the instructions really well. So what ends up happening is that it's way too thick. He's just at this point now, he's tired and frustrated. He's about to throw his hands up at so he ate the thickest malto meal I've ever seen in my life for that day. But the best part is that we had a Tupperware container that he put the rest in, and he would pull it out of the refrigerator for the next 3 or 4 mornings and carve a chunk of malto meal off because it was a brick. It was just a giant brick, right? And God bless him. It was so funny, but it was like the instructions were right there. And I think that's what both of you specialize in, is when people have these realizations or they have these little panic moments. Christine, you with this, the emotion of money. Kim, you with people that realize I'm invested in something I detest, right? Yeah. If I find out that I'm invested in something that produces cancer in folks, big tobacco, for instance, things like that, I'm not going to be real happy about that. And I could swing the other direction and just pull all my money out of every investment because I'm freaking out about it. Or I could talk to somebody like you and find out what's the best thing to do. Christine, I could not freak out and say, I'm just going to bury my head in the sand and not pay attention to these little notices that are coming in my mailbox. And do something about it productive, even if it's that little baby step or a little small step that we talk about. So I love that. I love the fact that the two of you got together and had this podcast. Christine, I know that folks, this is the first time they're hearing of your book on Kim's podcast.
Yeah.
You have your own podcast and you have your, some contact information. How do people get a hold of you if they're interested in maybe starting a conversation, or maybe they have kids? Because Kim's audience is a pretty vast audience. She's got a pretty big audience, and a lot of them are very savvy. But I bet we've got some
Not
kids
everyone.
that maybe.
Yeah. Not everyone is, you know.
Oh, true. Yeah.
They're really not. I have a number of people in their mid 50s, you know, who come in and they have saved almost nothing for retirement.
Okay, true.
Because they didn't know how to do that. So you talk a lot about savings in the book too. And so people don't always know, even if they have investments. So yeah.
Well, and smart people like doctors and attorneys, they're very smart when it comes to medicine and when it comes to law. But if they haven't studied personal finance, you know, I have a lot of them who come to me and they're like, I feel really stupid. Like I'm making $300,000 a year. Like, where is all my money going? And I'm like, well, look, no one has ever taught you how to set up this system that's going to help you. So just because you're smart in one area doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate into money. So but they can find me on my website, which is simply my name, ChristineLuken.com. There's links right there to all of my books, to the podcast. If they're interested in coaching or courses, everything is all right there.
Great.
All right. Well,
I can't thank you enough for joining me. And Eric, I know you know both of us very well. So I think you were excited to have this happen.
Oh, totally.
And again, Christine, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you both. Yeah. And as always, our last thank yous for you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Deep Impact Investing Podcast with Kim Griego-Kiel. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Kim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask that you share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review. This actually does help others find the show. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we're going to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Deep Impact Investing with Kimberly Griego-Kiel, the sustainable, responsible impact investing podcast, reminding you that it's time to invest like you give a damn. If you have questions about this podcast or topics you'd like to hear addressed on an upcoming podcast, please email me at kim@griego-kiel.com. That's GRIEGO-KIEL.com. Or give Horizons a call at 505-982-9661 and be sure to ask for Johan Clausen. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to be notified when new episodes become available, and to share this podcast with colleagues, friends, and family. The companies I may speak about during the podcast are not recommendations for investment. Only you and your financial advisor can determine what the right investments are for you. Kimberly Griego-Kiel produces this podcast on behalf of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services. Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, Inc. is a registered investment advisor registered with the SEC. Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, Inc. and its financial professionals do not render tax or legal advice. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the host and/or guests and does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Horizon Sustainable Financial Services, Inc. This content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. None of this content may be used or duplicated without the express written agreement of the podcast host.